How does that sound? Does that sound okay? Okay. All right. I think I'll close the doors. That's okay. I'm going to close the door. Yeah. Oh, thank you. If you don't mind doing it. Thank you. Oh. Are you be loud, Jay?
I will be loud. Oh, it's gonna. Is the mic?
The mic doesn't go here.
Good. Okay. Cool. Okay. Wait for everyone to get seated. Welcome, everyone. Can we bring it down? We're going to be welcoming our speaker here in a second. This is Madison Sheffield. She's going to be sharing pathways to the state capitol, and it's really about how you can bring the student voice, kind of amplify that into decision-making halls. Even if you're not in the region around the Capitol. And my name's Jay Doherty. I'm with the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. So I'm happy to have all of you here. Thank you for coming out and supporting the event. Without any more, this is Madison Sheffield.
Thank you.
Round of applause, please.
Yay! Thank you so much. If anyone in the back can ever not hear me, just kind of raise your hand, and that'll mean that you can't hear me. I'm not being projecting. I'm a loud person generally, so I don't anticipate, but sometimes I mumble too. So just kind of raise your, go like this if you can't hear me. All right. Happy to be here. Madison Sheffield, she, her pronouns, from the California Student Aid Commission. And I have been doing policy work through the executive branch for about 6 years now. So I'm very excited to present to you here today and share what I hope is, helpful information and experience for you, and inspiration also. I will share a little bit about my story for getting into policy making, and what inspired me to be on a similar path to what you're on. I used to work actually as a lunch lady in New York City, and I got to just kind of help students, very young little students, make good decisions about their food every day and feed them really healthy and nutritious meals. And there was a few particular moments that me getting to kind of support these students in making a little bit healthier food choices. I could see it in these huge lunchrooms where these kids would try new things. Like one time we had this time where we ran out of turkey meatballs and we had to feed them tofu. And it's just, maybe chaos for a lot of kids who don't know what tofu is. And they all, I have supported them in trying something new, and that it was going to be good. And this whole classroom, when the teacher asked, raise your hand if this is your first day trying tofu ever, and almost the entire room of 100 little tiny kids raised their hand. And then she says, okay, keep your hand up if you like the tofu. And they all kept their hands up. And I still get these kind of little warm tinglies all over my body when I think about that moment, because I was like, wow, look at this kind of room of 100 little kids that I just got to impact with my, with my goodwill and my love for them. And so I think that moment was kind of my call to public service. A lot of people talk about having this kind of moment or series of moments of I feel like there's something in me that that I'm here to do something. I'm here to make the world a better place. And I imagine that if you're sitting here today, you've probably had at least one of those little moments, even if you can't really draw a pinpoint to it. And welcome, and please. There's a spot here for you. So I was way behind the times compared to you in terms of I didn't really pay attention to or know what government was until kind of after being a lunch lady for some years and having jobs for a few years. I met someone who worked in federal policy around school lunches. And I was like, oh my God, you do what I do, but like at a bigger level, and you make these big decisions about, what can be in school lunches, what has to be in school lunches, all this stuff. And I was like, had this like moment. And so I was like, what's your training? How did you get to where you were and where you are? And she said she had a master's in public health. And so I went, okay, that's what I'm doing. Went and got a master's in public health. Had a focus on policy, and knew that I wanted to just kind of have this really broad impact. And that may be something that you feel in the work that you do as student representatives, of you are representing a lot of people, right? Like they're trusting you with their voice, and you're using your voice to amplify many other people's voices. And I've always kind of felt that I wanted to represent a lot of people and make changes that kind of had this really broad, wonderful impact. So you're all way ahead. This is great. And hopefully that's a little bit of helpful inspiration for how I got to be where I am. So I want to talk just for a moment. Who here likes financial aid? Free money for college? Yeah, okay, great. So you may not know the Student Aid Commission. Most people don't know anything about state governments. They're kind of this faceless thing. But someone has to administer the money that the state has, and the Cal Grant program, for example, or the Pell Grant program, and many other kind of state programs. That is state money that the state has decided to give to you for free to go to college. And, if you're eligible in various ways, and someone has to do that. So my department that I work for is in charge of administering those programs that give money to people to go to college. So that's what CSAC does. I get to work on financial aid policy every day. I get to think about that stuff, how we should make it better, how can we be more student-centered, how can we be more focused on what students need every day. That's enough about that, I think. Okay, so for today, we're going to focus on these three things. I'm hoping these are the things that you walk away with. First and foremost, as Jay mentioned, as all the speakers today have really echoed, that the most powerful thing you have is your voice, and you clearly have already recognized that a little bit because you have decided to take on these various positions. And I just really want to kind of echo that even further today. And then we're going to talk about the various pathways for using your voice in terms of state policy. And then I want to highlight also kind of some of the biggest issues in financial aid that the presenter, the legislative affairs presenter from SSCCC presented on earlier, climate reform. I'm going to talk about that as well, and kind of how you can lend your student voice to some of these kind of big policy issues that my department and other champions are working on in this area. I'll just note we're going to definitely have time for questions at the end. I've heard you're a very eager group to ask questions, so I'll just want to make sure that I have enough time to get through everything, but we'll definitely have time at the end for questions. All right. Unless you have an absolutely burning question, let me know. And then there'll be someone to also monitor the questions on YouTube. So we're going to start by focusing on this. So the voice that you have as a student leader is the most powerful. And when you are joined together and echoing the same thing, your voices are just that much louder, right? And so if you're all kind of saying different things as leaders and championing different things, when you can find the alignment in what you want to say, both in the problems that students face and also the solutions to those problems and what students want in terms of solutions, think about how much louder you are as a group compared to individually. I heard you all doing the drum roll earlier, and it was so loud, right? I mean, probably that was one of the things you noticed too. Like if one person was in that huge room just like drumming like this, you probably couldn't even hear it. But it was like this huge wave when you were all just going like this together, right? Just this. Think about the even more impactful, amazing things you can do when you're championing a really, really important issue with equal unison, right? So we're going to do a little exercise to greater connect, because you, as the previous speaker also mentioned, the networking and having those connections between each other across the state, across segments, is just super, super, super powerful. So I'm going to have you connect with each other for a few minutes, and I'll give you a prompt and some guidance, and then you can get in some partners. So we're going to do a little exercise where I give you a prompt. You're going to take turns being the speaker in your little partnership and being the listener. When you are speaking, it is just a time to reflect on whatever comes up for you on the prompt, what your heart says about it. There's no right or wrong answers, and you're just going to kind of feel listened to by the person that's listening to you. As a listener, you're going to have a lot of thoughts and reactions and judgments and, oh yeah, I agree or I don't agree. Things come up. Just notice those thoughts and just return back to kind of really fully being present to listen to the person, kind of bearing witness to what they're saying. And that's because the prompt is, what issues are you most passionate about as a student leader? Okay, right. There's no wrong or right answer to that. It's what is passionate to you. What led you to take on this role? You didn't have to take on this role that you're doing. You didn't have to kind of choose to even be here today, but it shows you have something. There's things that you care about as a student. So I'm going to time you, and when I provide the timing, you'll each have an equal amount of time to speak. So when the person that's speaking will speak and enjoy being listened to, enjoy kind of reflecting on what comes up. Right, with the previous speaker talked about just how important it is to kind of just self-reflect and know ourselves, know our internal world. So you're gonna have about a minute to reflect and be listened to and hear what comes up for you. And then I'll just run the timer, and then you'll switch. Then the other person will speak, and then you kind of won't have dialogue then. But then after you both have a chance to speak together, then you'll have about a few minutes afterwards to kind of discuss what you heard with each other and whatever comes up. All right. Any questions on the activity before we start? Okay. So because many of you came here with people that you know, and it's really valuable to create connections across in new connections, and that's one of the wonderful things. I'm going to ask you to be honest and find someone near you that you don't know. All right, and please do that now, and I'll time you for. Is that true? Do you not know each other? See, now you got to switch it up. Yeah, good. Lots of engagement. Yeah.
Don't let it get in your way. I'm working around you.
Great, I'll let you know. All right, you can switch. You're gonna switch roles. So whoever was talking, you're gonna listen and switch. Whoever was listening is going to share. All right, you have 2 minutes.
once you get through it, you can do the presentation. You can kind of just signal to me and be like, okay, this concludes our presentation. I'll just stand up, and then I'll just say we're going into Q&A now. I would do maybe 30 seconds on like my other being trustee, how we go to the state capitol, even offer if anyone wants to come to a lobby day, that kind of thing.
Great.
Be like if you want to ask us any questions, and then just open it up. And we'll probably do that for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. All right, finish up your conversation. And when you're ready, you can get seated. They're having robust discussion. Rule followers. You can continue the discussion afterwards.
Come back for the speaker to resume.
Thank you.
Please give her the floor. Thank you.
Is that fruitful? Cool. Now you made another connection. So something that I can share from working in various areas of policymaking in the past few years is that every single field of policy has people that are well organized and well funded to have their voice heard with policymakers, right? So I have a background in healthcare policy as well. And in the healthcare field, the primary players in kind of the realm of healthcare are the patients, which is us when we go to the doctors, et cetera, right? The providers. So the providers are doctors and clinics and hospitals and all those people that provide the care. And then we have health insurers that pay for the care and kind of do the money part, right? So show of hands if we think that patients are likely the most organized and well-funded of those three parties in the healthcare realm. Right, so I would agree with you. Providers, so doctors, hospitals, they generally make a good amount of money. They work together in the same places or work for the same employer. So they have a natural kind of way to be in contact with each other, to organize. They also represented by labor unions frequently, or associations like doctors associations, et cetera. Hospitals have, CEOs who have a lot of money, for example, as well. Health insurers, probably all of us are like, oh, health insurers. Even if we have families that works in the health insurance industry, is very important. But health insurers also have a lot of money, and it's very easy for them to organize, to go to the state capitol and have their voices known. So in the healthcare realm, that's an example of, in the realm of healthcare, when there's issues that affect patients, picture if you're a patient and you go to the doctor's office and you have a bad experience with the doctor's office, how do you organize with other patients around something that impacted you, right? It's pretty difficult. How do you get a hold of people? So in the realm of healthcare, even though healthcare is supposed to serve patients, people that are seeking healthcare, it's really hard for people and for patients to organize and say, hey, these policies that are in the healthcare realm that impact us, please change them to policymakers. So every field has voices that are impacted in that field. So you're probably already thinking in the realm of education, right? There's students, there's teachers and faculty and staff, there's the institutions that you go to for school. So every realm has these various impacted entities that are impacted by the policies that the state makes, and not everyone has the same kind of ease in organizing and resources in kind of coming together to advocate for something, either for or against something in terms of state policy. So that's why the exercise that you just did was so radical, even though it's so small, is because when you connect with each other and you can come together on things that you align on to amplify your voice in the state capitol, you are giving yourselves power. Like, you have power inherently, but when you come together, you have even more power. And policymakers know that education, for the most part, is set up for students. Like, the idea, right, is that students go through the education system and get something out of it that you're paying for in various ways, if not just your time. And so policymakers know that. And so if they don't hear from you on a certain policy, then you're not weighing in, right? And so there's this kind of inherent door open for you as students to weigh in on how state policies impact you, and policymakers do want to hear from you. They won't necessarily always reach and go knocking on your door, but you have to go knock on theirs to tell them what you think about certain policies. Okay, so and just as you're doing that, you're going to have other people in the field also saying the same, going to the legislators' doors or policymakers' doors, saying, this is how this policy that you're thinking of impacts me. And lots of times your interests may be aligned with faculty, for example, in the health, in the education realm, but many times they may not. They might be different. So that's why it's so important that you're going and saying things about how policies impact you or things that you want to see changed. Because if they don't hear from you, they don't know, and they hear from other voices, right? Does that make sense? Cool. So hopefully that exercise shows you that just those little connections, they can be that simple. It can be walking up to someone and asking them how their day was, or how their Thanksgiving was, or whatever, can be just this really simple but radical act in connecting. So this is a picture of my boss, who's been working in financial aid policy advocacy for a while, and a bunch of student groups and student leaders here in the policy space. This is in the state capitol, even though it looks kind of ramshackle. It is the state capitol, and this is student leaders and student related advocacy groups and financial aid groups going to tell legislators about Cal Grant reform, which we're going to talk about later, and meeting with people and saying, this is what we think, right? So I mentioned that the one of the focuses for today is talking about the various ways to engage in state policymaking. And the reason I want to do that is because there really are kind of two big routes. And the legislative policy bill process is what most of us know and hear of and learn of in school. It's kind of what we think of as the policymaking realm. And in reality, this other process, the state budget process, is a very, very important, arguably larger place where state policy is made, because good ideas cost money. And we're going to talk more about that. But I just want to highlight that there really are two routes. We focus a lot on the legislative policy bill process, but I want to highlight this because the policymaking that I've done, that's all been through the state budget process. And this is primarily, this is both kind of executive branch and legislative branch together. This is a little bit more just kind of legislative branch focus, right? The three branches of government: executive branch, legislative branch, judicial. Got it. So we'll start with the legislative policy bill process that most of us are a little bit more familiar with, and then we'll dive more into understanding the state budget process. Okay, so the legislative process, we have this both at the state level and at the federal level. Most of us are pretty aware that there's an assembly and senate in California. It's called Thank you. House of Representatives and House of Representatives and Senate in the federal realm. Got it. So we have these two houses in legislative process, and the kind of the way that policymaking is done in the legislative realm is that a legislator, right, is voted into office. We all are very active citizens, active members, so we vote and get involved in the legislature in various ways. So we have these legislative members that have been represented by the people or voted in by the people. They come up with ideas on ways to change state law, and then they write a bill. The idea is often informed or given to them by advocates who raise issues, right? There's a problem right here in this state law. You need to change this piece, cross it out, add this other word, that kind of thing. And so when they get an idea, they write it into a bill and says, this is how I propose to change state law. This is going to be the impact, what it's going to do, etc. Okay. Then it moves through the house that it originated in. So if it started in the assembly from an assembly member, it'll move through assembly and get voted on and amended, and people weigh in and have discussions about it. Members of the public can come weigh in and say, we like this, we don't like this. And then if it makes it through all of that, it moves over to the other house and it has to do the same thing. A lot of people discuss and amend and edit, etc. If it makes it through all of that, it goes back to the other previous house, and then everyone kind of votes on it one more time, make sure everybody likes it. And if all that happens, then it finally goes to the governor's desk. The governor then weighs in by either signing it or vetoing it, or he can abstain from saying anything, and then it goes into law. And then it goes into law, and it's enacted, and state departments have to start implementing those rules, etc. Okay, so notice in this process, the way that the public engages with the policymaking is bringing ideas, first and foremost, bringing ideas to legislators for bills, and then weighing in as the bill is moving through. It's a very public process. There's many opportunities for individuals and groups, such as your organizations, to send letters. We hate this. This is why. We love this. This is why. You should change this part. It would make it better. This impacts students in this way. To meet with them and say the same things, or to go into the public hearings and say the same stuff that I just said, which is, this is how it impacts students. We like it. We don't like it, etc. Okay. The public, that's how you would engage with that process as a student group or as an individual, also just as an individual person. And then the way that in this process, the way that the executive branch, which is represented by the governor, the top, weighs in on that whole process is just formally at the end, right? At the very end, the governor just gets to say yes or no. There's not a lot of engagement from the executive branch in this process. It's primarily a legislative branch process. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh yes. Okay. So a beautiful example, in my opinion, and many other people's opinion, luckily. Let's see if I can do this and how this works. Let's see if I can move this over. Don't judge how many tabs I have open. Shh, it's okay. Okay, so this bill is now chaptered, meaning that this is law. It says right here, approved by governor at this time, filed with the Secretary of State. So, and you can see this was very recently, right? So this bill is a bill that my department, my organization, sponsored. So it was our idea, and we gave the idea to a legislator and said, hey, what do you think about doing this cool thing, which is that we have this random fund that's within our State Department's purview. We're in charge of this fund. The fund has been given to us in statute. It's supposed to do this one thing. We're supposed to basically sprinkle the funds into Cal Grant. But over time, various policies have meant that this fund is not really that useful anymore. What it ends up meaning is that everyone gets one additional dollar in their Cal Grant. Most of us agree, not very useful. So what if we did something more useful with this fund? And someone in my staff came up with this brilliant idea of what if we instead use that money and would go farther if we provided one-time grants to students to go to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. We actually don't have any HBCUs in California, and so this is a really wonderful way to support students in going to HBCUs. That's the path they choose, hopefully coming back to California, but not necessary, right? Hopefully they do. So this idea, we proposed it to legislator, they loved it. It just kind of moved beautifully through the process. No one was ever opposed, because basically it's like, we're not asking the state to spend any more money. We're just changing the use of the funds. And when you can find a way to do that, that's a brilliant state policy, because, you know, everyone wants money. Everyone wants money for ideas. So if you are not asking for new money, but you're saying, let's kind of shift this around, make this a way better use of this money. That's who's opposed to that? So sure enough, we had very little opposition. This is kind of what a bill looks like. It has some description of what the bill does. It's like a summary at the top. And then here's where it describes, this is the actual law. And let's see here. I wanted to also show, we go to today's law as amended. This is a public website, right, where all the bills are posted for the legislature. It shows kind of how the law was changed. It actually shows, right, this is the places we want to cross out. This is what we want to add. This is what is actually creating new policies. And then another place I want to show you, if I can also make it happen, is, I think it's maybe this one. This is the wrong one. Bear with me for a moment. I think it's this one. Getting to it, I promise. Okay, here we go. So this is an analysis. So members of the Senate and Assembly have to basically analyze the bill and what it's going to do, and provide that analysis to the public so they can fully understand it. And that's what this document is. And they have to do that every time it really changes, so that the public can still be aware of what's going on. And then, so I'm going to scroll down. You might recognize some names here, some community college districts, right? And then we have Student Senate for California Community Colleges right here. So this is this public record of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges and all these other community college districts sending letters to the author of the bill, say, we love this. Yeah, and there's usually more detail about why they love, you can elaborate your love for the bill or your hate for the bill in your letter. And then they put this up in public record. Pretty amazing, right? Okay, so let me see how I go back to, if I can successfully do this. Nice. Woo. All right, so that's an example of the legislative process. Now we're all experts, if you weren't already. Okay, so now I want to talk about the lesser known avenue for policymaking. And there's some kind of key foundational principles that help us understand how a lot of policymaking is done in the state budget process. And the state budget process is basically just the way that state decides how to spend money, right? We're not just kind of randomly like, oh, this cost popped up, this other cost popped up. We have to make a plan for how we're going to spend all the money that we have at the state, right? Mostly from people paying taxes. It's mostly how the state gets money. It's people pay taxes and then we decide what to do with it, right? So foundational idea, changing the world costs money. Probably most of you would not disagree with that. And also one of the primary ways, especially in the United States and democratic institutions, one of the primary ways we spend money is to support people who are lower income, to try to lift them out of poverty in various ways, or to provide kind of basic things that we think that the government should be providing. So K-12 education, so public schools, those are all primarily, or it's like close to mostly funded by the state. So the state has said, we think that we should spend most of our money, right, on making sure that kids have access to K-12 education. We spend another good chunk of our money at the state, kind of the whole state budget, about 40% of it goes to K-12 education and community colleges, actually. And then another, like, I think it's like 30 or 40% goes towards Medicaid, so paying for health insurance for low-income people. So that's, you can see if that's kind of how we spend most of our money, that's a reflection of our state values, right? How we choose to spend money is a reflection of our values, whether we're talking about our own individual budget with our own money, and also just up to the state level. Budgeting is priority setting. When in the future, when we have this money, this is what we want to do with it, right? And most people think about budgeting as like financing and accounting. And it's like, no, it's deciding your values and putting money towards your values and making a plan for how you want to spend your money. So it's not just like, oh, things randomly come up and then I spend money on them, right? Most of us do budgeting in some way. Like, okay, I need to set aside some money so I can pay for rent, pay for food, pay for college, et cetera, right? So we're doing it at the state level. So another key foundational piece to understand about state budgeting is, besides doing things costs money or changing the world costs money, is that the Constitution actually requires that we have a balanced budget. So not a very crazy idea, but the Constitution says, and it didn't always say this, but at some point, someone wrote it in to say, the state, and I'm talking about the state constitution, someone wrote in to say, we probably shouldn't spend more money than we have. Seems like a good idea, right? We are not the feds. We can't just print money. We also don't have money trees growing in California yet that I'm aware of. So we basically have to say, let's make a guess. Let's make an estimate of how much money the state is going to bring in taxes next year. And then what do we want to do with that? So that's what the state budget process is. It is a huge decision-making process around what do we want to spend money on, okay? And the vast majority of the money that I'm talking about just comes in through people paying taxes, both individuals and corporations paying taxes, as well as sales tax. When you go to purchase something, there's sales tax in California, right? And that just goes into this big pot of money called a general fund. And that pot of money is just kind of like whatever we want to do with it. The state also has lots of little tiny funds that say this fund is going to specifically go to this thing and this fund is specifically going to go to this thing. But what we're mostly talking about is this humongous pot of money that gets bigger and smaller based on how well the rich people in California do, because we have a lot of rich people in California who get their income based on how the stock market does. So when the stock market goes up, we get more money in the state general fund to figure out what to do with. And when it goes down, vice versa, which is unfortunately the situation we're in this year with state budget. Okay, so a key part about the state budget is it's a little bit different in terms of, right, I said with the legislative process that we talked about how it's kind of moving through the legislative branch. At the very end, the executive branch weighs in by the governor vetoing or signing the bill. In the state budget process, it's a little bit different. The Constitution actually says that the governor, the executive branch, gets to start the conversation. The governor gets to first propose, this is my spending plan. This is how much money we think we're going to have, and this is what I want to spend it on next year. Or we're going to have less money this coming year than we thought, and this is where I want to make cuts, like where I choose as governor with my priorities, where I want to make cuts in the state budget because we have less money than we thought we're going to have. So he puts out his first, like he gets to take a first crack. He or she or they, whoever's the governor, gets to take a first crack at putting out the budget. And then the legislative branch gets to review it and decide what they like. And that occurs over the course of about 5 or 6 months. And then at the very end of that time of kind of a lot of discussions between the executive branch and the legislative branch, they come to this big, massive compromise on what they think is a budget that reflects their values as representatives in the Assembly and Senate, and the governor and the executive branch. That happens around June every year, that big conversation. And one of the key parts about that process is that the governor, if you look at a state organizational chart, who likes organizational charts, but technically all the state departments, such as my state department, that administer the programs in the state are technically underneath the governor. And so the way that actually I wanted to show you something really quick. This is the part in the Constitution that says within 10 days of the submission of the budget, following the time of submission, I think I might have copied the wrong code. Oh, that's right. Okay. Basically says the governor gets to propose the budget. We have an estimate of the general fund revenues for the coming fiscal year, and then an estimate of the expenditures, right? Revenues, how much money are we going to have, and what do we want to spend it on? So that's what the Constitution says. Governor gets to start, then it becomes a joint conversation between the governor, the executive branch, legislative branch, and all of the public who also gets to weigh in. Okay. A key piece that I was just talking about is that all of the state departments that actually implement the law and run the programs in the state, Caltrans, making the highways better, Department of Parks, having state parks, Medicaid, running DHCS, running the Medicaid program, California community colleges, all of these state departments, those state departments, because they run the programs, they interact with the people who receive their programs and kind of interact with them. They are kind of the vehicle by which ideas are created and new policy ideas are formed. So it's a really different process. It's not that different, but because departments are running these programs, they have good ideas. We as a state department, for example, have good ideas on what we're interacting with people who interact with our programs. So in my world, it's financial aid. So we're interacting with students. We're hearing from students on what's working, what's not working, what are problems in this area, what are solutions in this area. We hear from the constituents that interact with our programs, and then we come up with ideas, and basically we put our ideas upwards to the governor. And the ones the governor likes and wants to fund get proposed in the governor's budget. So the vehicle by which let me think about what. Okay. So the vehicle by which you as a student engage in policy advocacy and having your voice known in the state budget process is to be very engaged with whatever state departments you're connected to and impact your work. And so in your realm, for the most part, especially in the world of advocating around community college changes you want to see in the community colleges, that would be the community college chancellor's office, the entire community college system that you are already naturally engaged in because you are engaged with student advocacy. Okay. So beautiful, I gave it a really good example, legislative process. Oh, one other thing, yeah. So a beautiful example of this is a recent change we had to our Cal Grant program. Cal Grant gives free money to students to go to college, including undocumented students here in California. And we recently basically removed a bunch of barriers that existed in the statute to students at community colleges getting Cal Grant. And this was in 21-22 state budget, $150 million new funding for community college students through Cal Grant. One of the key differences is that if you get a Cal Grant through this policy enacted, is that you're getting a Cal Grant through your community college, then you get to take it with you to a UC or CSU. And that sounds like such a basic, obvious thing that should exist, but it didn't exist in state law. That's largely because state laws were written a long time ago by old white rich men that went to college. They're the only ones who went to college because it was a very narrow, rigid system, right? So this is a kind of a good example of, has a high price tag, has a really, really good benefit. And so it has to be discussed in the budget process because we'll often see legislative bills policy bills that are really good ideas, but they come to the governor's desk and he vetoes them. He says, this is a great idea, but it's really expensive, and we've already decided in the state budget process we don't have a balanced budget, so we've already made decisions about how we're spending money. So we can't spend new money. We don't have any money for this next year. So let's discuss this really great idea you have in the budget process. We consider it among all the good ideas that people have, right? So the important point I want you to take from knowing that there's kind of these two various pathways is, just like in all of these pathways, the most important thing is elevating your student voice together, both with in your community college. If you're advocating for something that you're at the local change, that's true. If you're trying to advocate for something that affects all community colleges across the state, then you want to make those connections across the state and say, this is an issue that we're all seeing, right? And we have this great idea that is a solution that will affect us all. And then the pathway for getting your ideas known is to work with the state agencies, let them know of the ideas and problems that you're seeing and solutions that you're seeing, and also work with advocacy partners to have them also be a voice for you, to like other groups, like other student groups, UCSA and the CSU student group as well. So the louder, the more you're coming together, the louder your voice is going to be. Okay, and then so I want to hear from you. You shared with each other a little bit. I'd love to hear, kind of just share some of the things that came up. I'd share only for yourself. Let the conversation you had be confidential in a sense of don't speak for someone else. Just share. I'd love to hear kind of what are some of the things that you shared with your partners earlier about the issues that are important to you as a student. Yeah.
Currently, I know the UC system has a TAC program with the rejuvenation for community college, but UCLA and Berkeley, which is one of our two top schools here in California, are not part. I know the governor was trying to implement the schools, but that's what we should push for.
Nice. Thanks for sharing.
I didn't get to talk about this, but this has been an issue for some time. So I know that the CSAC, California Student Aid Commission, has come out with a SEER survey, the Student Expense and Resources Survey.
Yeah.
Which includes basic needs and talks about food and housing and started to include transportation for the first time. But transportation is huge in terms of accessibility to education, to tap into the other things that we talk about that are really important for students and as a way to get students out of poverty, right? Students for the last few years have gone up to the state capitol in support of pieces of legislation moving forward, made it onto the governor's desk, and then gotten vetoed because the funds weren't set aside in the budget. And this happens in good budget years, bad budget years. So I was just curious what could be done differently to help address the issue, because we see that the schools that do have free transit passes have better retention rates and enrollment rates and graduation rates, all of which are really important.
Yeah, really great issues. I'm going to speak briefly to that. Actually, I'm going to speak to that more in the questions section, just so but thanks for raising these issues. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm going to move on since I know we're a little bit behind. So one of the primary in our brief sharing here, we out loud, we didn't raise affordability, but I would imagine that if I were to ask you if affordability of college was an important or a thing that you've considered in your path, that you would probably say yes. And so we now have like just a lot of research that says the number one barrier to people even going to college is either the perceived or the real cost. Unfortunately, in California, it's mostly a perceived cost because we have so much funding available to go to college for free. but it's really confusing, and people get confused, and so they don't even apply, and they don't take advantage of the incredible funds that are available to them, both through feds and or the state and or institutions that you go to, and other availability. So if affordability is the number one reason that keeps people out of college, in particular, communities who historically have not gone to college and think it's not for me, it's too expensive, my parents didn't go, so I don't really know the pathway. That's particularly true. And so if that's the number one reason, well then if we can help students get into college by helping pay for college, then the door is open. And that's not to say it's solving all the problems, right? But it's opening a really big door, right? By just saying it's important. The state finds it important to us that as people of California, we've decided that we want to put our money towards helping people go to college, regardless of income. It shouldn't be related to how much income your family has, right? So that's what the Cal Grant program and the funds that we provide in California do, is they say, here's free money. We also have, we have student loan programs, but it's for the most part, most of our funding in the state is free money. You don't have to pay back. It's just here. This is important to the state. We're going to give it to you. Please, use it to go to college. So what's cool about California being here is that we have the nation's most generous need-based aid. Not all states give out need-based aid. Some of it's merit-based. It's a little bit of a combination here because we do have GPA restrictions, but basically it's saying if you have need, we're going to give you financial aid, not if you have good grades or you did all these extracurriculars. It's need-based aid. And what that also means is we have run the Cal Grant program is an entitlement program saying if you qualify, you get the money. You don't have to do anything else, and it's guaranteed to you. So we have we actually have about $2.3 billion just in Cal Grant in California. The totality of our state programs and how much we give out is closer to $3.2 billion. It's a lot of money across the entire state, billions of dollars, okay? And a lot of it's left on the table every day because people think they don't qualify. Woo. They're finishing on time. But so what I want to highlight is that, as I mentioned, there's outdated systems. The statute that established Cal Grant program and the other programs that we have is quite old, was created with different students in mind back in the day when only rich people went to college and had access to college. And so there's these kind of outdated restrictions on who should be eligible for Cal Grant. And one of the things we're trying to do in the state budget process is remove a lot of those restrictions. So we have restrictions related to when a student graduated from high school. So you can only be out of high school for about a year. If you decided not to go to college then, and you decide to go later, sorry, you don't get money. It doesn't really make any sense, right? It's just crazy. And we have the age of a student transferring to a four-year institution, also a limiting factor. And we have transcription GPA requirements also in the statute. Again, all these kind of limiting factors that are outdated and don't really support students who we want to have money to go to college. And this is, it's also just very complicated, as I probably don't need to tell you. So we have what's called the Cal Grant Equity Framework. I think one of the previous speakers was also talking about it as Cal Grant Reform. And this is a policy framework that was designed by student groups. The SSCCC was a key student group that was working with us to design this new framework for how to make our Cal Grant program more equitable, make more sense, serve more students. And then other student groups like UCSA and I keep forgetting the CSU student group, and other advocacy organizations that speak on behalf of students as well, and advocate around financial aid. And so a few years ago, all these, for years, these groups were kind of coming up with, how do we make this better? Let's brainstorm, put our heads together, and other policymakers and leaders in the policy space were like, how do we do this better? And they created a new framework called the Cal Grant Equity Framework that says, let's kind of rewrite, let's cross out places of the statute that don't work, put a new statute. And so that's what is called the Cal Grant Equity Framework. So the idea is that we want to make it just much more just and make sense and streamlined going forward. The primary students that would benefit under the Cal Grant Equity Framework are community college students. There are a lot of restrictions to students getting community college students getting Cal Grant in statute, and we would, under this, if this new framework were funded in the state budget, or when this new framework were funded in the state budget, we'd add 109,000 community college students would newly be eligible for Cal Grant because of removing these restrictions in law that are keeping them out by age and high school, etc. You can see a breakdown by the demographic groups that we'd really be increasing in number, having more access to. A big growth in specifically adult learners because of that age restriction that we have currently in the law, and the time out of high school restrictions. It would bring in primarily people who their first in their family to attend in college. And these are quite low-income students. So the idea is these are people who are, based on their income, they should be getting Cal Grant. But we have these other restrictions that have been there for a long time that keep them out, even though they have need. I've kind of talked about this. I'm going to go on. The Cal Grant program is different from the Pell Grant program. Pell Grant is a federal program that gives free money to students for college, but does not serve undocumented students. In California, the state policymakers have decided that doesn't make sense, so we want to give free money to undocumented students. So that's a very important thing to know, that Cal Grant is available to undocumented students in equal amounts to people who are not undocumented. So the way to do that is through the FAFSA or the CADA application. You don't need to know which one you immediately, once you go to the website, to figure out whether you do the FAFSA form or the CADA form. It will help you figure out which one you're supposed to fill out, but you only have to fill out one or the other based on the identity you have. Those forms are really important because that's you can't get federal money, you can't get state money, you can't get most institutional money if you don't fill out a FAFSA or CADA. So if you ever think about it or have someone tell you a reminder the FAFSA deadline's coming up, remember that, because you can't this money only unlocks if you tell people your information. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because the Cal Grant Equity Framework was dreamed of by Voice and other policymakers, and they came to a conclusion of what it should look like, and they passed that in the state statute. But when the state statute was enacted and signed by the governor, there wasn't sufficient money in the budget because it was a not good budget year. And so it says in the statute that it will be funded in a future year when there's good enough revenue. So what that means is that we're still advocating for it. We came up with the idea, it's a great idea, but it won't actually go into place until we have state funding. And so this is a place where you can lend your student voice and be super loud, because it will primarily benefit community college students. And it will basically open the doors to free money to over 150,000 more students in California. And once you open the door, then you can get more money in all these different places. You can get money in Pell Grant, Cal Grant, institutional aid, etc. And if we remove those eligibility barriers that are still in law, then suddenly the doors open. So that's what we're about with the Cal Grant Equity Framework, and that's where being involved with SSCCC is a powerful way to be involved in this. They are very involved in Cal Grant reform. They join in our work group meetings where we discuss kind of making this a priority in the state budget, and you can lend your voice in various ways, and letters, and being involved in SSCCC advocacy. So you are the next generation of change makers. That's why you're here. I want you to think for yourself. You already did a little bit of that, but what do you want to change about the world? What do you want to make better? All right. I'm going to finish there. I want to thank you all so much for your time and for having me.
So really, I think we're past
last for just a little bit. We're going to keep this brief. We'll do a Q&A. We're going to open this up to both of us. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, I'm a trustee in Los Rios, which is right around the Capitol. So every year we do a lobby day. Spend a lot of time, working with politicians, but that's really just having the privilege of being right there. So, if any of you guys are interested, thank you for the Zoom folks. If any of you guys are interested, there's no restriction to people being able to join. If you're able to get your school to fund you guys coming up or something like that, just the same as this event. As many as many people as we can get, we just amplify the student voice more. So keep it in mind. And if you have any questions about that process, Christ, my experience in that, and then any questions for our speaker, that'll be the time. But we'll keep it to brief questions, maybe just 2 or 3.
And I will respond first to the question you asked earlier. So yeah, it can be really frustrating when you feel like it's a really important issue, and it's continues to not be heard or get vetoed, etc. And if you continue the legislative route where you kind of have a legislator have a bill, what I would recommend is actually, if the governor keeps saying this is expensive enough that it needs to be in the budget process, then you ask a legislator to prioritize it in the budget, or you go to because the legislative branch has to engage in that budget discussion, and they have to get one of them to say, yeah, this is going to be something that I want to spend money on. That's an extra challenge because everything has a cost. Everyone has a million good ideas. Mm-hmm. So amplifying the student voice is really important. Also, you mentioned that there's some districts that are doing it really well, and it doesn't always have to be a state policy solution. So if you're continually getting the message from the state that this isn't a priority for us to spend money on, especially in a cut year that it is going to be the next probably few years, there's a lot of kind of ways to solve it kind of at a more local level. So identifying the funding that the districts that are doing it well, where are they getting the funding to do this? Listening to that, and then championing that with other districts, saying, hey, district, you maybe haven't been paying attention. You have this source of funding over here that you can use for doing mirroring what these other districts have done. So there's a lot of solutions at the local level that don't necessarily involve, because basically having the state say, like, all you districts, you have to spend your money this way, it's just a difficult thing. The state likes to give a lot of power down to locals to decide what they want to do. So doing that kind of cross coordination across locals is also a really viable solution. It's a lot of work, but I'm just giving you in terms of other solutions. So yeah.
And I'd consolidate what any one region or organization is working on. I go to these kind of conferences, there's 12 or 15 different workshops all on different topics. I'm sure you guys hear there's a million different initiatives. So consolidating, just so that you don't dilute it, and things that you find really important stand clear, I think is important. Yeah. The amount of everything can be improved, everything. Yeah. And the amount of different initiatives that there are just kind of muddies the waters. So if you're with a specific organization, if you can consolidate what you guys are focusing on, it makes it much more effective.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah. Just any questions about, Yeah.
You want to speak a little bit? Speak loud.
It's more like a comment or an idea. So I currently work at the financial office at my college. Oh, yeah. And one thing I've noticed is that we do have students who are dreamers that complete the application or everything. When it comes to the part where they're like about to say they already get their financial aid and everything, but they're interested in earning more grants for college or even earning more grants in general to, for example, get a job.
Yeah.
For FAFSA, people, they usually have better work study, which is the program I'm under. Yeah. So for the Canada academy, for dreamers, they don't have that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would be a good idea to bring more awareness and advocacy for some type of program that the California State Commission to start some type of program so students can earn something similar to our work study. Because,
yes.
I feel like most students who our juniors, once they get into college, the only thing that's supporting them is the house.
Yeah. So we do have. I'm just going to interrupt you so we make sure we have other time for questions. But love your point. Totally agree. Very big priority for lots of people, and policymaking an issue for sure. You probably are aware that UC Board of Regents is trying to figure out a way to pay students on campus and see if they can legally do it. So it's definitely an issue that people are paying attention to. Very, very important. Like, please continue championing that issue
and seek them out as well. Much better if instead of starting your own smaller initiative, you become a part of a larger one. Just to kind of create a united front as opposed to.
So there's the Dreamer, I think it's Dreamer Service Incentive Grant. Please look it up. I think the application is a separate application, but the idea is essentially to provide Dreamer students funding to have jobs. So look up that as well. Dreamer DSIG, Dreamer Service Incentive Grant, I believe. Yeah, it's on our website.
And we'll take one more question if anyone has a very brief one. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I want to ask what are the current plans for students who are transferring to UCs or students for the housing? So, most of the time transfer students do go straight into the department of housing. And then as well, I wanted to also add on the financial aid application, what are your thoughts on how, when you want to say if you're independent or dependent, you can only make it independent if you are 24 years of age or older. And that's kind of unfortunate because there are students that are less than that age, sometimes live alone, or can pay for their own bills, and do not go under the financial status of their parents. But yet, for some odd reason, the financial aid application doesn't allow.
Yeah, I can answer the first part, and then if you could just specifically, we have a bill where we're two things. When you said about their student housing, of the $17 billion that were for the California community colleges last year, $1 billion of that was to build student housing, and I mean that's a very large amount of that. So they're taking this issue seriously. And then in terms of being able to live in that housing, or kind of that issue of having a place to stay, or being able to stay in a region that you want to, we're changing it so that when you're going to transfer, you can you can get to a school that's in your area before, like you may get deferred. So you apply to UC Davis, they say, I'm sorry you didn't get in here, but you got into Riverside, and that doesn't work, right? It's like, I work here, my family's here. So completely changing that to now you can be region bound, and whatever corresponding regionally, the ADTs, the associate degrees for transfer, to majors available at colleges in that area closest to you. So making that work, building housing in that area is kind of being able to, just we're getting the time.
On the FAFSA and the FAFSA indicator, there's ways to work through the questions that you should be able to, like, there are really complicated situations in which you are essentially independent and your caregivers are not financially supporting you. You can go through questions to kind of answer more detailed nuances of that. Just kind of, I haven't done it recently, but I know that exists. So look into it again, because I know that there is a viable pathway for there to be more complicated situations than just dependent or independent. But thank you. That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all so much. What a great work.